Thank you for, I guess, hosting this today, Governor. The one thing that I do really appreciate about this is the fact that we need to think about this from a long-term perspective. I mean, generally I can say I'm opposed to lowering the tax right now just because of the record production, the fact that the number of active wells has actively or been increasing, and it's projected to increase in 2011. You know, I think most of us can agree that the power to tax is the power to destroy, and if we make taxes too high, it will hurt us in the long run. I'd also argue that in the short term, the oil companies and the mineral right owners are doing just fine. There's not an immediate crisis. There's no need for significant changes right now. 5-10 years from now, if we're seeing a problem with production and it's becoming, I guess, more cost efficient to drill in Texas or Montana or even Alaska, then I'd see the need for a change. I really just don't see the need right now, simply because of the huge boom we're in.
What would you tie it to? I mean, you know, do you say you see production fall off, or if you say, okay, in the future maybe we should lower it, do you do it on barrels, or you do it on a global price of oil, or do you do it on number of drilling rigs, or what? Yeah, how would you measure it?
The best indicator, I think, I mean, from a long-term perspective, is looking at receipts, revenue. I mean, if we see from year to year inactive oil wells, if we see that companies are leaving the state and that tax revenues are decreasing, that's probably a good sign that the tax is too high and we need to cut it.
So
those indicators just aren't there right now.
You tied to revenue.
Probably revenue. I think most of us agree that the purpose of a tax is to benefit the public, and if our tax is too high and doesn't provide enough revenue, it's not helping the public as much as it could.
Well, that, you know, revenue's the issue, you know, because our government's so dependent now on oil. You know, it's a good point. I'd ask you to consider a couple of things. One, we talked about the ramp-up time that it takes. So if your revenues start falling off, how long does it take you to get them back? But the other thing is, interestingly enough, we've gone from $800 million in revenue from oil extraction in North Dakota in the last budget to $2 billion in this budget, and it's projected in the next budget to be, the one they're working on right now, to be $3.5 billion. So we've seen big revenue increases coming in. Here's a consideration. When's the best time to lower taxes? If it would cost us in revenue, for instance, $400 million to lower the tax to a competitive rate, I don't know what the number is, I'm just throwing out a number. Say it costs us $400 million. Now, is the time to lower the tax 3 years from now when you see the revenues falling off? Or is it time to do it now when you have the money to say, yeah, we can absorb that investment in the future and do it while you have the money in the bank, instead of trying to catch up and saying, well, our revenues are down, we should lower taxes to get our revenues back up, but if we lower taxes, we're going to have less revenue than we have now, and we don't have enough. So when, you know, just consider when's the appropriate time to do that. I always advocate lowering taxes when you have the money. It kind of makes sense to me, but you know, I appreciate the discussion, because I think that's what we're talking about. When do you do it? Is it based on some kind of a trigger, your suggestion about when revenues fall off, or can we trigger it to the number of barrels that are coming out of the ground, or the number of rigs that are drilling, or, you know, how do you get your arms around this thing? Importantly, not for today, but, you know, how are we going to develop public policy that will really set the oil companies in here so they're drilling those wells and bringing out the revenue so we can pay for all of the great services that we want from our government?
And how do you make sure whatever you decide is the correct barometer, that when it's a blinking light on the dashboard, it's not too late? As you know, the Gulf situation is prompted right now. You know, there was the moratorium on drilling in the Gulf. A lot of rigs have moved offshore, overseas. They won't come back for what? How long? You had years? I mean,
well, an offshore rig, you know, they don't move that back in 10 years if you change the policy today. It's the mobile drilling rigs on the terrestrial drilling rigs are not that restrictive, but they still, you don't move them fast.
Question right here.
This is great. Thank you. Thank you for the discussion. This is awesome.